Let's move on to national security issues.
Okay.
You have been very critical of Barack Obama in recent months on a host of national security challenges facing the United States. But it seems to me from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya, Barack Obama has pursued strategies which have the support of a clear majority of the American people.
And I'm sure that there are other times in this country's history and in your country's history where people have stood up for what they know is right, even though it's been unpopular. I understand the American people. They're glad we're out of Iraq. We had a president once named Harry Truman. Everybody wanted us out of Korea, but he stayed. And the world is a much better place for having made that sacrifice and that stubbornness on the part of Harry Truman. The fact is that the president said in his campaign in 2008 he'd get out of Iraq. We're out of Iraq. You know what the situation in Iraq is today? It's unraveling.
Do you think it would be better if the American troops were still there?
Everybody knows we should have left a residual force of some 20,000. And that's what Condoleezza Rice said that we had always contemplated. And I know from being there that the Iraqis would have agreed to that. I know that because I was there with them.
But on Afghanistan, for example, you clearly have been deeply critical of Leon Panetta, the Defense Secretary's latest line that combat forces may well be out by the end of 2013. But are you suggesting that if combat forces were to stay there indefinitely, that somehow Afghanistan's problems would be solved?
The President of the United States overruled his military advisors when we didn't leave a residual force in Iraq. The President of the United States overruled his military advisors when he accelerated the withdrawal. The President of the United States overruled his military advisors when he sent 30,000 instead of 40,000 in the initial buildup. And the President of the United States is overruling his military advisors when he is making the decision to come out in 2013. These are people that the President appointed, some of the best and brightest minds in America. The President has no knowledge or experience or background on these issues, and he is amply displaying it on a regular basis.
Let's talk about Syria as well, because as we speak, more civilians are dying in Syria. The UN Secretary General has just talked about the appalling brutality being inflicted upon the people of the country by the regime, the Assad regime. You have suggested that the US should be looking at many different options in response to what is happening. I believe you've alluded to the arming of Syrian rebels. Do you really think that would help resolve the Syria crisis?
Do you really know what the Iranians are doing right now? They are not only bringing in weapons and artillery that are killing Syrians, but also the Iranians themselves have come into Syria while a massive bloodletting is going on to the thousands.
So what should the United States do?
The United States should be examining all options with other countries, including Turkey, as to how we can best help these people stop this bloodletting and this massacre that's going on.
To be clear, do you want U.S. arms to be sent now to the rebels in Syria?
I'm saying that is an option that cannot be taken off the table.
But there is no UN sanction for intervention in Syria in the way there was in Libya. Isn't that a fundamentally important difference?
Isn't it fundamentally important for you to understand who's preventing that? Russia and China.
Well, I know who's presenting it, but it doesn't change the reality that the UN does not give its backing.
Then your view is that we let Russia and China determine whether we're going to allow the massacre of thousands of innocent men, women, and children in Syria? I'm not. The Arab League is going to take, and is taking, a lead role. Turkey is going to be very important. We have to have sort of a coalition of the willing. In fact, our Secretary of State has suggested that, and we have to get them medical help. We need to give them technical help. The Syrians, the Turks are giving them sanctuary, and there's lots of things we can do. But the fundamental answer to you is the United States of America is not a nation that, if it can prevent it, stands by and watches massacres of innocent people.
I understand the point you are making, but it just seems to me that on a whole range of fronts, given the philosophy you have, you are envisaging another round of US interventionism of one sort or another. Because let's talk about Iran as well. You've suggested the Iranians may be doing significant things inside Syria. The fact is the US president faces a very difficult and big decision on Iran. It may have to be taken this year. Is it your view that the time has come for the United States to take military action in Iran?
No, but I agree with the President of the United States who says an Iranian with nuclear weapons is unacceptable. That's our President's viewpoint.
But what I notice, and it brings us back in a way to the Republican race, is that the Republican candidates, all of them in fact, have suggested that Obama has not been strong enough in his language and in his approach to Iran.
It's leading
in
from behind.
Yeah, but okay, no, so when Rick Santorum said the other day,
let me interrupt you 1 second. In 2009, in June, there was a flawed election in Tehran. 1.5 million people were demonstrating in the streets. We watched a young woman named Neda bleed to death in the streets. The demonstrators were chanting, "Obama, Obama, are you with us or are you with them?" He didn't give them a single word of encouragement. That's not Ronald Reagan.
No, I don't think Obama would agree with that for 1 second.
It's a fact. No one denies it. It's a fact.
Well, you know full well the White House denies it absolutely.
No,
says they were very clear in their support of the democracy movement.
They do not deny that, and facts are they didn't.
But the point I want to get to is what the world might expect from a Republican administration in the future. These are the words of Rick Santorum the other day. He said on Iran, he said, quote, "We have to take their facility," meaning their nuclear facility, out. We have to take it out to prevent a wider war. Is that the sort of mindset that we should expect now?
Well, that's one person's view, but the President of the United States, President Obama, has said it's unacceptable for the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. Then the question is when do you reach a point where decisions have to be made? And will those decisions be made by the Israelis by themselves or us and the Israelis? The sanctions have hurt the Iranians a lot, but they have not deterred them from the course that they're on of developing nuclear weapons.
A final thought, which in a way wraps up much of the debate we've had about these specific international challenges. You have made a stand against the Obama administration's plans to cut projected military spending by almost $500 billion over the upcoming decade. You've suggested that will endanger U.S. interests. Is it not more of a danger to U.S. interests to go on spending on the military and many other things as well in a way which simply stacks up a completely unaffordable debt for your grandchildren?
There are savings and efficiencies that can be enacted, and I have proposed many of those, and we are working to adjust to some of the reductions. Previous Secretary of Defense ordered $100 and some billion, which we're enacting now, 460. Now, if sequestration takes place, another 500 billion.
Sure, you've suggested some changes, but the significant changes Obama has proposed, which include losing pretty much 100,000 ground troops, include phasing out a whole bunch of warships, maybe closing some military bases as well. These just seem to be, frankly, a sensible recognition that the world has changed, some of the threats have changed, and the U.S. military has to change too.
Yeah, there's an old line about those who ignore the lessons of history. After World War II, we were never going to have another war. Korea. After Korea, we weren't going to have another war. We could do it with special forces. Vietnam. After Vietnam, we weren't going to have to. We could win wars on the cheap. Operation Desert Storm. All we needed was air power. Every time we have believed that you didn't have the fundamental of warfare, wins or loses in warfare, and that is military capabilities, we've paid a very heavy price for it. Now, I'm ready for efficiencies. I'm ready for the renewed emphasis on Asia-Pacific, which, by the way, is very expensive with ships and aircraft, if we are truly interested in strengthening our position in Asia and Pacific. And we have a very expensive all-volunteer force. But I will tell you now, I travel the world. I talk to leaders around the world, and I talk to leaders in the Middle East. And I can tell you what they tell me. They say that they believe America is weakening and withdrawing. Now, that's their view. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but leading from behind is not something that I think the United States of America should ever do, because then who's going to lead from in front?
Interesting that you put it that way. I don't think that view of American decline is necessarily the case. But you've had a very long political career. You've had your ups, you've had your downs, but you have always tried to be at the center of the debate about how America should behave in the world. When you look at the United States today, do you accept that the US has to find a way of changing and, frankly, drawing in its horns to a certain extent in the way it relates to the rest of the world?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure what your interpretation of drawing in horns is. If it means that we would draw to Fortress America, then no, I don't agree. Every time we've tried that one, as we did prior to World War II, we paid a very heavy price.
Maybe it means not trying to police the world and intervene in so many of the world's problems in the way that we've seen in the last decade.
I think what the United States has to recognize in the 21st century is that we are in a multipolar world. You see the rise of China. You see the rise of India as another superpower very soon, China especially. And we will no longer be the dominant world power that we were for a long time following World War II. But that does not mean isolationism, which, by the way, there is a fairly strong amount of in my own party. It doesn't mean isolationism. It doesn't mean withdrawal. It means the use, having military power, but also understanding that we have a relationship in the world that's different from the one in 20th century. But I'm not ready to give up on America and the good, I believe, the greatest force for good in history.
Senator John McCain, we have to end there, but thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thanks for the spirited conversation.